Welcome back to WCB Jazz Vinyl. We're going to continue the discussion today on Time Traveler Records and their new Muse reissue series. So far I've made videos on the Kenny Barron title, the Carlos Garnett title, which means today we're going to cover The Free Slave by Roy Brooks. Even before, I think, the renewed interest in 1970s jazz, The Free Slave has been a sought-after title by collectors, and it's because, yes, the music is quite excellent. So let's talk about why, and let's get into this release. As always, go ahead and hit subscribe so that you're notified in the future whenever I post a video. You can follow me on Instagram at what_can_brown, and check out Gamut Recordings. This is my new label, and we're releasing the Pepper Adams Quintet, originally put out in 1957, and it's coming out on October 24th, so go check out the website. I'm really excited. Can't wait to talk more about this release in the coming weeks. All right, so at this point, this is kind of part 3, right, in the Muse reissue series of my videos. I'm going to cover these particulars about what the label is really quickly so that we can kind of get past it. So the details are that these are all mastered from the original master tapes by Matthew Luthans at the Mastering Lab. It's pressed on 180 gram vinyl, pressed at Optimal Media. These are Stoughton glossy tip-on jackets for each of these. There's new liner essays. Zev Feldman, who we all know from Resonance Records, we know him from Elemental and Jazz Detective. He is one of the two producers. The other is James Batsford from Newland Records, which is based out of the UK. They're putting out that great Chet Baker box set, which I have in and I just haven't made a video about yet. So anyway, a lot of good people involved with this release, I think, is the point. So as we kind of get into this, let's start with who Roy Brooks was. So Roy Brooks was a Detroit musician. He got connected, as far as I can tell, with Yusef Lateef in at the late 1950s or so. He played on Horace Silver's Song for My Father, and in 1963 he also had the opportunity to record his very first album as a leader, which was titled Beat. This is actually an album that I covered maybe 2 years ago on my channel, actually. As an aside, and I know I just mentioned that Chet Baker box set, Roy Brooks is in the lineup on each of the 5 albums, I think it is, in that Chet Baker box set. So many more opportunities to hear Roy Brooks' fantastic work as a drummer. So why do I think that The Free Slave by Roy Brooks stands out in the Muse catalog? In a word, it's the energy of the performance. So this is a live recording in contrast to the other 2 that are being put out. In fact, in contrast to so many recordings on the Muse Records label. And I think oftentimes you can kind of credit that live format for as the reason for more inspired performances, because it allows the musicians to kind of feed off each other in real time. It's not this carefully rehearsed, who knows how many takes that they go through in order to get it right for a record. And it turns out that this is also a very energetic and I also think attentive audience as well. You can kind of hear them shouting throughout the recording. I mean, not like always. They're not distracting, but they're definitely in the background every now and then. This album was recorded at the Left Bank Jazz Society, which is located in Baltimore. It was recorded in 1970, which means that technically Muse didn't commission this recording because Muse Records didn't exist until the following year. So this likely would have been something that Roy Brooks shopped around and found a home with at Muse Records. I definitely think that the result on this album is quite inspired performances by the group. And by the way, that group includes, of course, Roy Brooks on drums, Woody Shaw on trumpet, George Coleman on tenor, Hugh Lawson on piano, and Cecil McBee on bass. I will say that Brooks had a reputation for incorporating some unusual instruments into some of his records and performances, and you will hear a little bit of that here, both in terms of a homemade instrument that I'll get into in just a little bit, as well as almost like a gong or something like that you'll hear at the end of track 2. All right, so the music. The pieces here, of which there are just 4, are extended tracks in duration. So the shortest one is just over 9 minutes. And I think having that kind of time allows this group to certainly stretch out their solos and establish just really great grooves that sort of pull the listener in. I actually do really love each of those 4 compositions here, and I think that the title track is certainly iconic. Even if it's only because it sort of helps establish this fantastic set as well. But it's the second one, it's the second track that's titled Understanding that I think really captures your attention. There is a little bit of a Latin feel to it, though maybe not overtly so. I think it establishes much of this music as post-bop, and it is what I would call slightly modal in feel. It's not strictly modal. There are chord progressions here, but it has a modal feel, certainly in places. And I think this is also I think this is some of the best work probably that I've ever heard from Woody Shaw, which is saying something because he has some really fantastic albums on his own. In fact, even for Muse Records. I also think that this album showcases some of Roy Brooks's best work, even if he doesn't have, call it, extended pieces or long sections where it really is just about him. I think that some of the beauty of his work here is in the nuance. It's in his cymbal accents and his fills, and he just sounds really, really good. On the other hand, I actually think that George Coleman's best work is on the piece Will Pan's Walk. This is a really interesting tune in my mind because Roy Brooks uses that homemade instrument that I referenced earlier to essentially change the pitch of his drums by like breathing into tubes. He calls it the breathatone, and he plays behind the musician solos on this track, and then he uses it again actually on the final piece. So as with Kenny Barron's Sunset to Dawn, which is one of the other ones in this series that I addressed in another video, I think that this reissue sounds every bit as great as the original pressing. Now, obviously, you're going to have some benefits with the repressing, with the reissue, because it's going to be cleaner, because it's going to be in better condition, probably, than what you can find with an older record. But I also think that there's better clarity on this one compared to the original, especially with Roy Brooks's drumming, which you kind of really do want to be the highlight here since well, you know, he's at the helm. I think that with some of the other musicians besides Brooks, it's a very similar sound that you get with that original pressing, and it's also a very live sound as well. But Brooks's sticks, I think, were captured really well, and I think they sound even better, especially here with the Time Traveler edition. So my overall comments are that this one does sound better. Yes, it's still live, like you kind of have to know that going in because it does have that live sound, but it does sound better, and I think that there is more detail associated with this brand new edition. So that sort of concludes, I guess, my discussion of not just this album, but also of these first three records that were put out by Time Traveler. So you can go back and check out some of my other videos if you want to hear my thoughts on those two as well. I think that each of these albums that they chose to release for this first tranche or this first set of releases, I think they serve different purposes. I don't want to say different audiences because I think there's a lot of us who are interested in getting involved in really all of it. But these are very different tones, I think, in terms of stylistically. With each of them, I think that there's more. I think that there's more possibly spiritual, certainly freer feel with the Kenny Barron title, more atmospheric. Certainly, you heard my comments on this one. I think it's about the energy. There's like a post-bop kind of feel to it. And the Carlos Garnett is a little bit more funk, and it's a little bit more rhythm and kind of I don't know. It's that kind of thing. And obviously, big band as well. So these three records hit at very different sort of spaces, I think, in the Muse Records label, and I think it helps establish that Muse was not just a one-trick pony in terms of always going for a particular sound. So, you know, I think that this is a great way to start. They focused on records that otherwise are difficult to get in their original form because of the price that you have to pay. So I think keeping some of this stuff in print, like that's something in and of itself, right, is making sure that this music is available. And you know, I think we have confidence based on these first three that James and Zeb, as they continue to release additional albums in this series, that they seem to have pretty good taste, which is always good to hear, right? So I'm interested in hearing what comes out next. I think that we can probably expect another announcement from them, call it in another month or so, if they're going to keep this kind of quarterly thing going. So something to pay attention to. Certainly follow them on Instagram, and of course, as these releases come out, I'm sure, based on the strength of these first three, that I'll continue to provide you my thoughts here on this in this format as they come out. So super happy to have these records, and very happy that they're back available for as many people as want to hear the music as well. So thanks very much for sticking with me as always, and I will see you next time.